from Abbey Road's Sun King by the Beatles. During an earlier paradigm, of course, humans worshiped the sun, looked at the sun as a god. I guess some of us here in Las Vegas still do. But we've moved on. One of the people, the premier chroniclers of paradigm shifts like that, the guy who has pulled all these threads together into a central narrative dealing with UFOs and other mysteries, has been Dr. Jacques Vallée. I've spoken about Dr. Vallée and interviewed him on this program, and my opinion of him in this field is no secret. I think he's the most important thinker ever to write about the topic. So about a year ago, there was a meeting. Tom met with Jacques Vallée face-to-face. I'm not going to say too much about it, except that going into it, Dr. Vallée was skeptical and reluctant. And now I open this book up, Gods, Man, and War, and he's written the foreword. And he writes, "The experience of the unknown is only deepened, raising unsettling questions about the intrusion of the uncanny into our shiny modern world of convenient machines and superficial entertainment." He calls the book a bold re-examination of the meaning and nature of unexplained aerial phenomena, and it is. And the co-writer is Peter Levenda. He joins us in just a moment. Stick around. Welcome back. Peter Levenda is a scholar and author of multiple books. He's been on Coast to Coast numerous times. He's interviewed Nazis, neo-Nazis, Klansmen, Satanists, witches, occultists, intelligence agents, clergymen, bogus clergymen, businessmen, military folks, and others, and is the co-author of Secret Machines, Gods, Man, and War. Welcome back to the program, Peter.
Thank you very much, George.
Let me start this way. Is this the book you set out to write when you and Tom first got together and talked about it? Is this what you figured you would do, or did that change somewhere along the way?
Well, it changed, of course, because, in large part, because of the kinds of conversations that Tom was having with people that he was talking to. So I was getting some information that I had not had before. I had gotten perspectives and different types of perception on this phenomenon that I had not had before. I came to the subject from a different direction. I didn't come to it as a believer in UFOs or UAP or anything like that. I came into it from its historical interest to me because of every time I tried to research something in American history, it seemed a UFO popped up somewhere in the storyline or a UFO experience or people connected with the UFO phenomenon. So I was fascinated by this kind of thing. So I was researching all of that and doing a lot of study on the personalities that surrounded the phenomenon in especially the last half of the 20th century. And then, Tom and I start talking, and Tom is telling me about things that he's having, discussions he's having, conversations, and it's opening up new avenues of investigation. But most importantly, it's causing me to rethink a lot of what I already thought that I already knew about this phenomenon from reading, over 100 books and so many declassified documents from various government agencies and the military and everything else. You build up a certain picture. And then there are conversations that we had which opened up new avenues and said, wait a minute, and I began to think really carefully and really intensively on this subject, on the data that we had and the data that we were getting, and realizing that I had to rethink this project because I was becoming excited by the possibilities. I started to realize that there is something that's, I hate to use the word, paradigm shift, because everybody uses that for anything. A new McDonald's hamburger is a paradigm shift. But in this case, it really was for me. It changed the paradigm. The paradigm was we are going to proceed from the understanding that the phenomenon is real. That's the very first thing. We're proceeding from there. We're not trying to prove it. I mean, I think that's been done to death. There are just so many books with so many sightings, and so much of this stuff has gone on already. Nobody needs another book on sightings at this point, unless it's something really earth-shaking. So what we're doing is just saying, let's proceed on the assumption that it's real, because we do accept it. I accept that it's real. And I've never had a UFO experience. I accept that it's real based on the data, based on the evidence, the eyewitness testimony, the radar scans. I mean, all the other stuff that's come in over the last 50 years or longer leads me to have to the inescapable conclusion that this is a real phenomenon, whatever it is. So if we proceed from that point of view, and then we go back and look at everything that's gone on before, suddenly it all becomes a little clearer what's going on in history and society in general. And that's why Volume 1, Gods, is really about religion, but not from the purely sort of Zecharia Sitchin point of view or the Erich von Daniken point of view, of trying to reinterpret religion in terms of aliens. It's a completely different approach, I think.
It is, and we're going to cover it. Let me ask you this, and then Tom can jump back in. Did you buy the characterization of the government folks, the military folks, as the good guys? You've written so much about collaboration with Nazis, about cover-ups, secret societies, bad things that have been done, supposedly in the interests of national security or economic security or whatever, deals with the devil. I think about UFO stories that I've written about cover-ups and disinformation that's put out and lies that are told, spying on UFO researchers and infiltrating UFO organizations. I guess as you accumulate all this information, read those 100 books, do you feel now that the end justifies the means?
Wow, there's a mouthful there. Let me backtrack.
Sorry about that.
You're absolutely correct that I've written about government interference in virtually every aspect of our lives. I mean, I've covered, the assassinations and, Watergate and Iran-Contra and on and on and on. So when it comes to the government interfering in things they shouldn't be, yeah, you're 100% correct. So I'm not naive, and I think that's one of the reasons why, Tom can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's one of the reasons why Tom had me on this is because I brought that kind of skepticism and that kind of jaundiced, sort of perception to all of this to see if I could separate the wheat from the chaff on this. Because yes, we've done a lot of things. I mean, the UFO community is very well aware of it. But I think Tom's approach was unique, and he sold me on this approach, which is the UFO community has been in an adversarial relationship with the government and the military since this whole thing began, really. We knew we were being lied to in the 1940s and 1950s. There just was no doubt about it. I mean, a lot of
60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, yeah. Right.
Well, yeah, starting from the 40s and 50s, but going on from there. So we've been lied to. There's no question about it. And there is an adversarial position, and they have infiltrated UFO groups, and they've tried to do what they could. But this raised a red flag to me, and it said, well, why are they doing this? What is the reason for it? It seems like an awful waste of time and money and personnel to go after a bunch of people they regarded as tinfoil hat UFO freaks, right? Why them? What was the reason? What do they get from it? Cui bono, as they say, right? Who benefits from this kind of intrusion into the lives of American citizens? They're protecting something. And this all went on really straight through the Cold War. And I think we have to understand that political environment as well. This whole thing with the UFO stuff, especially the really intensive things that happened, was happening all the way up to 1989, at least, the fall of the Soviet Union, the Berlin Wall coming down, and all of that. I think when one of Tom's people said, now is a good time or now is the right time for this, it's because we're past that phase of extreme danger. And this ideological conflict that we had with the Soviet Union and with the Chinese as well, and Cuba, all the communist countries lumped in one big umbrella. We're at a point now where things are dividing up, things are splitting up in ways that they hadn't before. And this may be the time to start talking seriously about what this phenomenon is. And by approaching the government the way Tom has, by saying, look, we're not the adversaries, we're not the enemies, we're not going to accuse you of all sorts of skullduggery. Tell us what the truth is, if you can. If you can't, tell us you can't. We understand about security clearances. We understand you can't violate them or you go to jail. We understand that you'll lose your reputation and your livelihood, if nothing else, if you violate these things. And I've known people like this. I mean, I belong to organizations. I hang out with intelligence people and everything else. These are very serious people. And it doesn't mean they're all evil. They're not trying to, disrupt our lives necessarily. But they have their orders and they have their security clearances. So our approach was, tell us the truth or tell us nothing. Be open with us as much as you can. If you can't be direct with us, give us some hints, drop us some crumbs. tell us like Woodward and Bernstein, during Watergate. If you can't tell us, then just, give us a hint, or, if I'm saying the right thing, don't hang up. If I'm talking nonsense, then hang up the phone. Remember that famous scene in
Sure.
All the President's Men. So you take an approach like that, and then Tom will come to me with information. And again, I'm skeptical. I remember very clearly, the Dodi Benowitz case and all these other cases.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, that ruined that guy's life,
Ruined it, absolutely. And, Linda Moulton Howe was dragged into it as well, The thing that I find sort of salutary about all of this is that we, by we I mean mostly Tom approached them. No one's approached us. No one said, hey, I've got some great, video to show you, or I got some, documents that you shouldn't see. You can look at them, but you can't take them home. None of that stuff has been happening. There's been none of that. There's been a sort of arm's length, slowly but surely. We'll give you a little bit. We'll see what you're going to do with it. Are you going to betray us? Are you going to, blow our relationship in some way? Or are you going to handle this respectfully and seriously? Are you serious individuals? And I think that when we started to work on this thing, and I worked on Gods, the first volume of what's going to be a nonfiction trilogy, and I wrote the opening statement, which is really kind of a mission statement, the prologue to the book. I think people realized, number one, we were not, crazy enthusiasts going out there and believing, 6 impossible things before breakfast. That was good, Plus, we took a very sort of calm and skeptical and scholarly approach to the subject matter, but from a different angle completely. We do things in that book that I think have not been done before. We're challenging the UFO community in a way that I think they have not been challenged before. And they need kind of, from my point of view, as someone who's a relative outsider, they need this kind of challenge. They need to see that the challenge is good because we're getting at something much more important and something deeper.
Well, there's something in here to tick off pretty much everybody, starting with the ufologists and churches and government people. And I mean, you've pretty much covered the gamut. Tom, I'm going to hit you with the same question. I mean, you read all these UFO books coming up as you're on the learning curve about bad things government has done to individuals and organizations, disinformation, lies, and things of that sort. Do you just give them a pass for that based on what you know now?
With this subject matter, I do. I mean, the government is not one entity, or it's not one group of people that all talk to each other. I mean, you're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar corporation with many different divisions, that don't talk to each other, that have all of their own motives for everything they do. But on this very specific subject matter, the end justifies the means. And once you start to, Peter definitely knows a lot more than the average scholar on this subject matter because just by nature of being involved in the Secret Machines project, but I think he can vouch for this next statement. When you start knowing some of the stronger details of what's going on, you look through a completely different filter on everything they did for the decades before. I mean, I can look at some of those books and some of those things have been written about JFK being assassinated because he was going to bring all the UFO material out. There's quite a long history of that conspiracy. I can actually look at that and go, well, there's a part of me that goes, I can see people coming to the conclusion they needed to do that once you know some of this stuff. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying I'm for it. It's just when you try to be objective on this stuff and you look at something that was potentially existential threat, it's like, and they're working on something and they're trying to get something right to defend us. You don't want to blow it up right when you're having some progress. So you start to look at things in such a different perspective, and it's really mind-blowing, to be honest. But I don't have all the facts, and I don't give everyone a pass. I just know with this subject matter, I think it's an end justifies the means kind of situation, and I would have to agree.
Well, you know how it is. I'll start with you and then bring Peter back into it. But you know how it is. People want the information right now. They hear, all right, Tom, a year ago you said you had this panel of advisors and you're working toward disclosure. You're going to get to the bottom of this thing. Where is it? You know, I get it pretty much no matter what show we cover. If we don't reveal the whole thing in the first 5 minutes, people get ticked off. So there are people right now pulling their hair out. Tell us where the flying saucers are, Tom. What did you learn? Where are they? Where are these aliens from?
Well, number one, there's multiple different races. It's not just one specific kind, and the different races don't get along with each other, and we don't really get along with them either. And when we look at, this is one of the greatest things about Peter. You have to when I first started working with Peter, and you can tell with his eloquence, he was able to put things into words that I was able to use that really got me in the door. I mean, I remember, and this will answer the question. I mean, what you're saying, because it's a really big, long answer. If I was to tell everybody, okay, this is everything, and it's gonna take me thousands of years to describe what's happened over the past thousands of years. But I remember I used Peter's words of a cargo cult, which is this idea that it's not an idea. It's Peter, why don't you explain what a cargo cult is? Because this is going to lead into how I used those specific words about the cargo cult, and that was the trigger where someone looked at me and said, okay, I'm going to introduce you to somebody, and that's where the door opened up. And once you start thinking about the cargo cult, you start going, oh, my God, all the world's religions are tied to this. So when people go, well, where's the alien? Where's the flying saucer? It's all about the little – no. It's all about thousands of years of looking into the sky and seeing something and creating different religions based on it. So, Peter, maybe you can explain the cargo cult thing so that way I don't muck it up too much.
We're going to a break in 2 minutes, so, Peter, take a whack at it.
Okay, cargo cult. This kind of cult was discovered during World War II for the most part in the South Pacific Islands. You had people living in a Stone Age environment all that time until World War II broke out. And on their islands were being used as supply depots and everything else. So people living in these villages would suddenly see all these planes coming in with people wearing these elaborate uniforms and radio communications, and the planes would disgorge all of these boxes of medicine and food and all kinds of good stuff. And the people witnessing this, these Stone Age people living in that kind of an environment, are watching this thing through the leaves of the jungles, you know, and they're saying, all we have to do then is duplicate what these people are doing. We build ourselves an airstrip. We build ourselves a conning tower, or not a conning tower, but a tower, a radio control tower, an air traffic control tower. We build ourselves kind of stuff that looks like the stuff they're using, and maybe one of these planes will land here and give us stuff. Basically, they created a religion around what they perceived as this supernatural event, and they saw it as a supernatural event. They didn't see these people as people. They didn't see these machines as anything that was, man-made. They saw this as some kind of supernatural event that was taking place, and a religion sort of accreted around it like barnacles on the hull of a ship. And basically that's what, from my perspective and the way we're introducing it in Gods in this book, is that the cargo cult concept, that theory, is what is at the root of not only our religions in the world in general, this religious impulse is based on that, but also our science and technology is part of that same cargo cult.
We'll jump back into the big themes, the big picture, with Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda talking about gods, man, and war. Bob Dylan takes us into the break with Subterranean Homesick Blues. We all need a little of that. Saving Grace is the song from Tom Petty, his Traveling Companion or Highway Companion album from 2006. Great album, underrated. We're talking with Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda about their new book, Gods, Man, and War. It's a UFO book without UFO cases. We're going to explain why when we come back here on Coast to Coast AM. In this new book, Gods, Man, and War, an official secret machines investigation of the UFO phenomenon, there isn't a whole heck of a lot of UFO cases in there or incidents. As Peter Levenda mentioned a couple of minutes ago, the book starts with the premise that it's already real. We don't have to prove it again. We can start with that as a place to open the discussion. Peter, explain to me how wide of a net you threw in pulling various threads together as a way to explain the UFO phenomenon in sort of a way it hadn't been done before.
Well, in the first place, what I was interested in doing was to investigate the earliest textual evidence we had from various civilizations, societies around the world, to see if there was evidence, if there were traces of a memory of an event that they described in similar terms. In other words, something coming from the sky or something seen in the sky, celestial beings, arcane powers, that sort of thing, and try to see if there are any similarities in their narratives going across from one civilization to the next, just looking for trace evidence, because I felt that these people in the ancient times, people who had just developed writing and were just beginning to write down experiences and what we sort of deprecatingly refer to as their mythology, that they are actually referring to real events. There's a kind of truism when you study anthropology or you study religion, that first there's the event, and then there's the myth that explains the event. So the event is real. You may get different interpretations of it. You may get people struggling with trying to explain what they saw or trying to describe what they saw without even explaining it, but just even describing it. So there's this struggle that takes place. So if you look at all of these various scriptures and these ancient forms of literature, you can find traces like that. So my initial approach in Gods was to go very far-reaching, was to look at some of the very familiar subject matter that we have, biblical stuff in the West, but then to expand that out, looking at ancient Sumer, at Babylon, looking at ancient Egypt, which is a very rich place to start as well, because they built an entire approach to burial and to mortuary science, let's put it that way, but with a view towards immortality and actually traveling to the stars. The idea of building the pyramids was to, as one pyramidologist explained it a couple of years ago, was to create a resurrection machine. You know, that's what the pyramids, from this point of view, were intended to be. And it was always oriented starward. So the opening of the mouth ritual, the mummification ceremonies were all done with a view towards the soul, the essential nature of a human being is somehow connected to the stars. So the Egyptian is sort of very blatant about it. Some of the others are not quite so obvious, but if you look at them, if you read the scriptures that they've written, you can see that there is the same concept. Everything refers to heaven as a place that is above the earth, that is someplace not necessarily contiguous with the earth, but it's there. It's a celestial homeland. So starting with that concept, I developed this idea from reading all of this that there must have been a point of contact in the distant past. We, as Homo sapiens, were traveling on this planet for a couple of 100,000 years before suddenly at some point about, 15,000 years ago or so, we all decided around the world to start developing civilizations. And we all started, building pyramids for some reason. There's pyramids in China and pyramids in Egypt and pyramids in Central America. So you have this idea that we're doing something. We're building structures that are astronomically oriented. We're developing civilization. We're developing cities. We're using our resources to build these elaborate temples. And why are we doing this? And then I saw parallels today. Our science is doing the same thing. We're expending money and resources and focus on going to the stars, just as our ancient ancestors did in building their so-called resurrection machines.
The idea being, all of these early civilizations, the Sumerians and Babylonians and Aztecs, and they're all sort of mimicking something that they have actually seen. It's not a coincidence.
Just like a cargo cult, exactly. They're mimicking something that they saw, and they're trying to duplicate it, and they're trying to get back to that state, whatever that was. We keep yearning towards that moment when this contact happened. And what's happening now is that after thousands of years of religion dominating that conversation, we've moved into science dominating the conversation, going to the stars. And from my perspective, as we'll develop in the later books, I believe that both of these things, considered separately, are not enough, but considered together will give us the key to understanding the phenomenon. And I think that's what we're close to doing now. the idea of disclosure requires not only somebody coming out and saying, yeah, flying saucers are real, little green men are real. Disclosure requires us to be sort of reverse engineered. It requires our consciousness to get to the point where we can understand these concepts now, that we can actually see what it is we're talking about, and we can approach it more safely. And I think that's what's stopping us, and we're seeing the clues, and Tom has seen them, and he's communicated these things to me as well. We've had long conversations about this, is that we're at a stage of being able to understand what this is, and it's not what we think it is. And I think that's the important takeaway from this. It's not what we think it is. What we think it is the result of all of these accretions, of all of these ideas that have gone on before, and all these various religious things get, mixed up. Ideology screws this up a great deal. If we can strip the ideology out and only talk to the mystics and only talk to the shamans, we'll get a closer idea as to what this is. And
the other ology is ufology. Tom, when you started down this path, as for me and probably for Peter as well, the prevailing view is UFOs, lights in the sky, craft from other planets. They're here visiting us, checking us out. That's not what you're looking at now at all. I know I mentioned about the meeting with Jacques Vallée, who has always sort of had the idea that it's too simple of an explanation, that the ultimate big picture is much more complicated and wondrous. That's where you are now, right? Is Tom there?
Guy, I think the universe is so big and there's so much going on in it that almost anything is possible. Is there a dimensional thing that's going on? Probably. And is that another intelligence? Probably. Are there people coming here from other planets? Probably. And it just goes on and on. I do know that one of the things that gets really confusing for people is, orbs. Now, these little balls of light that come in, if you're watching Discovery Channel, you think that these are ghosts, and they have them on Ghost Hunters and all that kind of those shows, and they'll have camera footage of an orb that goes down the hallway of a haunted house or a hospital when someone dies. But those same orbs do some pretty funky things to people that see UFOs all the time. The orbs can show up and cure someone's cancer. I know somebody who had his cancer cured by that. And I've actually seen all the videos and photos of the orbs in his backyard because he's being studied right now from various places. And these orbs will do some tricky stuff. They make him feel that it's all religious. So to this guy, it's all about Christianity. And he's just like, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. And I'm so blessed that these lights are here. Now, those same orbs are projecting holograms of gray aliens, the little ones with the big black eyes. I call them bugs. And you're kind of going, okay, so why are these orbs showing up and downloading into this guy's head when he's in his living room? Go get your camera and come out to the backyard. And then it does a song and dance for him. Maybe it shows an alien. Maybe it cures him or his friend. They brought other people over that got cured for cancer, And but then there's this whole, it's like this big religious experience, and it's all good, but it's all kind of confusing. And then on the other side of the world, these orbs are showing up, and they're doing really, really bad stuff to people. And there is no good about it. There is no happy, a Christian tale. So it's what is the phenomenon? Well, it's a lot of different things. It's kind of all the above. Is there a craft in the sky that's controlling these plasma balls of light? And they're little drones, and they're meant to confuse you, and they're meant to make you feel like it's all hunky dory, But I don't know the answers to all that stuff. But I think. It's just not simple, It's just not simple, and it's like taking an iPhone and putting it in front of a cow and asking the cow if he knows everything about the iPhone. Maybe the cow knows it's a phone, but doesn't know anything about all the other things it does. I have no idea.
Well, let me ask you, sort of in a direct way. Have you been told that there are visitors from elsewhere, either dimensional or other planets or both?
Yes.
That they are intervening in human affairs? Have you been told that sort of directly?
Absolutely, yes. And let me expand upon that. I always got to think about how I say these things. There's a lot of things that I can't say, but when we tie some of the others to mythology, one of the things that was hammered into me was specifically, the gods intervening in human events at a time and at times where there's industrialized warfare and trying to help different sides end because there's a political means to the industrialized warfare. So it's taking sides. God's taking sides, and Peter. I mean, one of the reasons I loved working with him was he had such a great understanding and a really large understanding about God's intervening in human affairs in antiquity, and all of the ancient texts are just littered with the gods helping one side against the other.
Well, and being at war with each other. Peter, that's an important theme that you develop in great detail in this book about the gods being at war with each other using various skullduggery and weaponry, and it seems like it's for control of the planet or of us. Is that your contention?
Well, I think that some of that plays out here. I think that we've witnessed it in dim antiquity. We've witnessed something of that nature. It scared us tremendously, and we chose sides, or we thought this side was probably better than the other side, or maybe one side had dominated and another side was the aggressor. I mean, it's really hard to come up with modern-day contemporary viewpoints on this. We have to go back to understanding, how they saw what was happening. People who were not technologically advanced, like the cargo cults, are witnessing a struggle. The people of the cargo cults, the real cargo cults in the South Pacific, were witnessing exactly that. They were witnessing the Japanese fighting the British and the Americans in the Pacific during World War II. So they saw that there were two opposing groups fighting each other, right? So they incorporated that, to some extent in their histories and in their belief systems, this idea that there was kind of a struggle, that there were, fascinating weapons and the ability to fly over the planet and to do all sorts of things. I mean, imagine what that must look like to a Stone Age civilization. So
but in the book, though, you make...
That doesn't mean they understand what was going on, right?
The argument being in the book, there are numerous examples of ancient civilizations that are describing wars between gods. There's scripture, there's carvings and petroglyphs and things of that sort. You think that there are at least some of these that need to be taken literally.
I think so, literally to the extent that something was taking place and it was not human in the sense that we understand it, or else they would have described it that way. There's certainly enough things in the Bible that describe, tribes fighting tribes, for instance. There's no hint of, necessarily there being any supernatural component to that. But if we go back to Genesis 6 as an example, and there you have the sons of God and the daughters of men, and so what does that mean? That's one of those phrases, that sections of the Bible that nobody really understands and can convince me that they understand it. You have something called the sons of God, the Bene Elohim, and then you have the daughters of men. And the sons of God think the daughters of men are really cute, and they go and cohabit with them, and they have children. And it appears that these children are sort of genetic monstrosities of some kind, because they're called the giants, which is one way of interpreting the term Nephilim. So you have this happens, and then immediately, in the Bible, Genesis 6, after this description of the sons of God and the daughters of men, God gets very upset with the human race and decides he's going to destroy the whole planet. And that introduces the story of Noah. So there's this bizarre segue that you go from some beings that we don't know, that are obviously not human, because we're emphasizing daughters of men and the sons of God. And why would the sons of God be evil, right? Why would God be upset with his own sons if this was the case? It didn't seem to be the case. The sons of God were a way that they had to describe otherworldly, non-human beings who were actually cohabiting with human women and then giving birth to basically hybrids. Right, so you have the David and Goliath, thing that happens later, and Goliath is one of these monstrous beings that was created that was not destroyed during the flood, but which actually survived the flood, even according to the Bible. So when you look at events like that, you think in terms of, we learn about Greek mythology in school and it's all nonsense. Well, no, they're attempting to describe things that actually happened using the terminology they had, the language skills they had, and the context that they had. So they are describing, conflicts that took place for which they have no earthly counterpart.
Tom, you start casually asking your advisors questions, sort of feeling your way along, not wanting to push it too far. But you ask one of them in particular, and I hope you can talk about this. I think you can, there's a reference in the book, some question, and he gives you the answer. Instead of him telling you, yeah, we've got the flying saucers stashed at Area 51, or it's the reptilian race from the planet Serpo or something, he tells you to take a look at Greek mythology. That's not what you were expecting to hear.
Oh my gosh! It was not only was it not what I was expecting to hear, it was told to me 3 different times from different people at those levels, and I missed it. I missed it the first time. And then it was brought up the second time, and then my heart sank because I go, oh, my God, I was so dumb. I missed it the first time when it was said to me. And then I flew across the country and had a chance to meet somebody that was of the highest ranks in multiple places in the government. And right when I sit down and I have a chance to bring this person on board, I'm in there very modestly just saying, okay, sir, let me explain to you what it is I'm attempting to do. And he stops me and he goes, when I was a kid, I used to read a lot of Greek mythology. And he just stares at me. I'm like, oh my God, here it is again, And it all goes back to that. But I really do think that's about one particular race. It's not about all of them. There are multiple races. I think when it comes down to the Greek mythology, I had to get some clarification on that, and it's exactly as I described earlier in what Peter gets into in the terms of these gods are intervening in human affairs. But at that point in time, during ancient Greek times, that's really when they made themselves visibly known, potentially for the first time. They've been doing it long before that, but at that moment, it seems as though they were really visible, and that's when we got the Greek alphabet. That's when we got the democracy stuff, and that's when we got the architecture, and that's why if you look at Washington D.C., the architecture is very similar. It's in the Western world. We've been living off of the information that this intelligence has been giving us as they pop up from time to time. And
sorry to intervene right there, but we need to take a break. That's a really important point, and we're going to pick it up on the other side. We're talking with Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda about gods, man, and war. We have an early classic of surf rock guitar take us into the break.